I was asked a question recently about how would you go about creating different tones of hair and fur from lighter to darker. So I thought, why not make a short video about it? As you can see from this picture that I'm working on, there are a lot of different tones within the fur, whether it be the darker markings or just the areas in shadow. I start by embossing the fur texture into the paper with the dart, making sure that the dart is at an angle so as to compress the fibres of the paper. A blunt 2B pencil is then lightly applied over the top of the embossing. Because the pencil is blunt, it will not go down into the embossing and the texture that has been applied will stand out. You can see I use a tangled pattern to create the texture that I want, and when doing this it is best to work in small areas at a time. Now I have slowed the video down because I do tend to work quite quickly when doing this, as I find that this tends to produce a more realistic pattern. The one downside of using the dart to emboss the texture is that it is very difficult to see what you have done. But if I shine a light across the texture, it is easy to see, as it casts shadows in the indentations. When using the blunt 2B pencil, it is important to not just shade over the top, as this doesn't look right. Instead, I have found that to get the best result, you want to use the pencil as if you are actually drawing the hair or fur over the texture. Because I am using the pencil lightly, this can take a few layers to build up the strength of tone that I want. I now apply more texture with the dart, but this time I will apply 9B pencil over the top, and as you can see this gives a much harsher contrast. For darker markings, like for example a tiger's stripes or the spots on a leopard or cheetah, you want to first apply 2B pencil. Again, build this up in layers, and as I am doing here, use a fur pattern to do this. Then simply apply more texture with the dart, before using more tone over the top. And for example, I'm using 9B for this. Now this does produce a very subtle texture, like for example on the tiger that I am working on. If I want the hairs to stand out just a little bit more, I apply a little bit less 2B pencil and then use a blending stump to just soften the tone and smooth it out. Apply texture and then tone over the top. Now generally speaking, for something like this I would probably use a 4B, but I'm just using a 9B just to exaggerate the effect. As previously, I've applied 2B pencil and texture, but this time I'm going to use the putty eraser with a point rolled on the end of it to remove some of the surface tone, and this again will create a slightly different effect. I now use a sharp 4H pencil to again emboss the same texture into the paper, and as you can see this produces what I would say is about a mid-tone. But if I apply 9B over the top, the mid-tone will suddenly appear a lot lighter. This is basically an optical illusion. The darker tone will overpower the lighter one and effectively make it look even lighter. I now repeat the same process, but this time using the sharp 9H pencil. This produces a slightly finer and fainter line, and when the 9B is applied over the top, we get a slightly different effect again. Now I am using the 9B over the top for this demonstration, as it will produce an immediate effect. But it is a much better idea to use 2B and 4B and build the tone up slower in layers, as you can then stop when you get to the desired effect. Another thing you can do if a texture looks too harsh is you can use the blender to brush tone down into the embossing. This will create a softer look that can also be used to create the effect of shadows within the fur or hair, effectively pushing these areas back whilst leaving harsher areas helping to create the effect of depth. This can then be further exaggerated by applying 2B and 4B pencil to the darker areas. Another thing that you can use 4H and 9H pencils for is to drag a darker tone. For example, as I said earlier, the 4H that I use naturally produces what I would say is a mid-tone. But if I run it through the 2B, that I have just applied, it produces a much darker line. I now do the same thing, but this time using the 9H pencil. And as you can see, the lines are a little finer. This is ideal if you want to break up the edge of a darker marking like a tiger stripe, leopard spot, or to create a transition between a darker area into lighter fur. You can also use this to create fine dark lines. Just lightly apply 2B pencil and then use the 4H to emboss this down into the paper. The putty eraser can then be used to remove the excess surface tone, leaving the fine dark line behind. This can also be done with the 9H pencil and even the dart, depending on how fine you want the line to be. However, the dart can be used to emboss tone down into the paper, but unlike using another pencil, it cannot pull the tone because it is metal, and it will just slide over the graphite. So I hope this video has been useful, and if you do have any questions or suggestions on a particular video that you would like to see, please leave them in the comment section below. Thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next one.